You're listening to the Sex and Psychology Podcast, the sex ed you never got in school and won't get anywhere else. I am your host, Dr. Justin Miller. I am a social psychologist and research fellow at the Kinsey Institute and author of the book, Tell Me What You Want, The Science of Sexual Desire and How It Can Help You Improve Your Sex Life. For most people, their sex lives are largely invisible to the rest of the world. We might share a funny dating story with friends or mention a relationship challenge in passing, but the most intimate details of our desires, insecurities, fantasies, and experiences usually remain private. As a result, many of us end up wondering whether our own experiences are normal. But what if we could peek behind the curtain and see what's really happening in people's bedrooms and relationships? For years, journalist Alyssa has been collecting exactly those kinds of stories through her Sex Diaries column at New York Magazine. Week after week, strangers have trusted her with some of the most intimate details of their lives, creating an extraordinary archive of modern love, sex, dating, and relationships. Those stories have now been collected into a new book that offers an honest, funny, vulnerable, and deeply human look at intimacy. In this episode, we're diving into what Alyssa has learned from a decade of collecting people's sex diaries. We'll explore what it's like to collect people's most intimate stories, why people are often willing to reveal secrets that they've never told anyone else to a complete stranger, and what years of listening to these deeply personal accounts has taught Alyssa about sex and relationships. This is going to be another fascinating conversation that you won't want to miss. Stick around, and we're going to jump in right after the break. If you love the science of sex as much as I do, consider becoming a friend of the Kinsey Institute at Indiana University. The Kinsey Institute is the world's premier research organization on sex and relationships, and you can help them continue the legacy of Dr. Alfred Kinsey, whose pioneering research changed everything we think we know about sex. Visit kinseyinstitute.org to make an impact. Your donations can help support ongoing research projects on critical topics. You can also show your support by following Kinsey Institute on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you for supporting sex science. Hi, Alyssa, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really been looking forward to talking to you.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. So you've been collecting people's intimate stories for years through the Sex Diaries column at New York Magazine, and now you've published a collection of never-before-read diaries in the form of a book. So I'm curious, how did you become a curator of people's most intimate stories?
Well, there's two ways to answer that. I've always been that girl who was passing notes about crushes and hookups and, who will lose their virginity this summer. I mean, I was born that way. I'm a daughter of soap operas and girl talk, many, many aunts and women around my family. It's very natural for me to talk about love, sex, dating, and everything in between. But then professionally, I've always been a writer, and I have written for everyone, and I've written books. And about 11 years ago, New York Magazine, one of the magazines that I often freelanced for, and I mostly did food writing for them, but they heard that I was about to become a single mom by choice, which was true. And they called me and they said, "We imagine you need some dependable income right now." This story actually makes me really emotional. It's one of the harder things to talk about because it was such a life-changing thing and such an act of generosity on their part. So they offered me the Sex Diaries column. And they said it's every week, dependable income, good money for a writer, and you can take it as far as you want to. And 11 years later, it's pretty much my first baby. Now I have two others. And we're still going strong, stronger than ever, actually.
I love that story. Sex changed your life. And
it's really wild because the irony is I've only had the Sex Diaries column as a mother, and I've only been a mother with the Sex Diaries column. And while I've always been very sexually uninhibited and I was sex positive before I ever knew the word, the fact that I took over this column, right? I don't want to say when my own desexualization began, but when it all changed for me. My entire relationship with sex changed after having kids. And it's kind of tragic in some ways because it's like, oh my God, the old me, what I would have done with this column. But it's also like, well, maybe I needed to be this grounded, more responsible version of myself to be so good at it.
Thanks for sharing that. So we know that people struggle a lot when it comes to talking about sex, even with the people that they're actually having sex with. So when the idea for this column was first proposed, did you think that people would actually be willing to share the details of their sex lives with a total stranger? And how did you even find people to do this?
I knew it would be hard. I didn't realize it would be this hard. There's a few things. Number one, it's super anonymous. So I always knew I had a few things working for me. Not only is it anonymous, but I can change details. So depending on your level of trust in me, you can do a diary with me and I'll call you Tina from Staten Island. I mean, I want,
I'll be
I
Tina
want
from
my,
Staten Island.
yeah, you could have some fun with that. I want my diarist to feel really safe and comfortable with me. So there's the anonymity that helps. But for me, it's not as hard finding people to talk about sex because I find that everybody loves talking about sex. Some people will only go so far, but I'm sure you're the same. I walk into a party and sometimes I don't want anyone to know what I do because forget it, right? Like it's all anyone's going to want to talk to me about. It's more finding people who are willing to put in the time. It's 7 days of your sex life. There's no compensation. You have to trust the world who will be judging you and the weight of the commenters. It's more of like a heavy lift in terms of finding someone who's willing to take that on. And so it's 100% the hardest part of my job is finding people, scouting people, and then basically begging them to do the column.
Yeah.
But once they're in, once they say, yes, you've got my attention, I find that people really love to go there. And it's always the unexpected ones that actually have the good stories.
Yeah. In my own experience, once people find out what I do and they start talking about sex, then you can't get them to shut up about it, right? Because it just sort of opens the floodgate because finally here's this safe person that I can talk to about sex. And maybe they don't feel like they have anybody else in their life that can really serve that role for them.
Exactly. Just before we started this podcast, I got a voice note from a very well-known person, basically a celebrity who I don't even know how they had my number. We met maybe 20 years ago at a party and they texted me a voice note she's a female, she's single, and she wanted to know if I knew how she could get whatever the modern day version of an escort is. She said, I'm super horny. I don't want a man. I don't want a relationship. There's only so much I can do with my vibrators. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm scrolling my phone to see pictures of my daughter at camp. I'm listening to this voice note from the celebrity asking if I know how she can get a male sex worker. And I'm like, what is my life? What? No. And so I love talking to people like you. It's like, what is our lives?
Never a dull moment. So, I've studied the sexual fantasies of adults for many, many years, and I've always been struck by how willing people are to reveal things to me that they've never told anyone else in their life about before, including the people that they're having sex with. And it sounds like you've had pretty similar experiences. People seem to trust you with their most intimate secrets, even though they don't personally know you. So, why do you think people are so willing to open up when things are anonymous? Do you think that that says something deeper about sexual shame? Is it that people just want to be heard? Like, what do you think is going on there in terms of why the floodgates just sort of open when they have this opportunity to sort of anonymously talk about their sex life for the first time?
The first thing that comes to mind is I think it's Esther Perel who says, we are our stories. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something really validating in releasing your story or rereading it and proving to yourself that you have a cool life, you have a sweet life, or you have a hot life or whatever. I think there's something in that. As far as the anonymity, I think we don't know who to talk to about these things. People lie to their therapists about their sex lives. Mm-hmm. There's very few people to turn to, especially when things aren't great. That's one thing about the column that is a blessing and a curse. I find that people who are experiencing really heightened sex life or having the best sex of their lives or they're on some kind of bender love talking about sex. They want to write a diary. They're like, you have to hear, I fucked 4 men last week and it was all consensual and it was all insane and one was better than the next. Those are the people that want to write a diary. Great. But that's not the reality for most people. It's getting the people who are struggling to open up. That's the work.
Yeah. And there's certainly going to be a selection bias in terms of who's willing to write one of these diaries for a lot of reasons. I imagine some of the folks, maybe there's even a little bit of exhibitionism in it where they kind of like get some titillation in knowing that other people are turned on by their own sexual exploits. But for others, there might be this sense of shame that they can't talk to anybody else about this in real life because they are afraid of being judged, but it's okay to do it anonymously because then they can be sort of separated from that social judgment. So I'm sure it's sort of a complex set of motives. And I think you're totally right too, that for the people whose sex lives just aren't going the way they want them to, it's going to be a lot harder to get them to open up about what's going on there.
Definitely. About the exhibitionism, that's going to be baked into every diarist, no matter what. But sometimes when it's too much for me, it's not the kind of diary I want to publish. Mm-hmm. There's been a handful of diarists, not many, who have come back to me and said, you promise you'll leave this line in about when the stranger said my ass looked great, right? Or you promise you'll leave this line in about, how his penis was the best I've ever seen. And I start to piece it together and I'm like, oh, you're writing this for a guy. Like mm-hmm. you're writing this because you can't wait to send it to the guy who you like so that he thinks you're desirable by other people or whatever it is. I get it. I've been there, but I don't like publishing those diaries because they're not authentic. And I know that word is overused, but I need them to be authentic.
Yeah, I totally get that. So the diaries that you publish feel incredibly intimate. It's almost like we're living through the events alongside the person. But do people actually hand you perfectly written sex diaries, or do they have to be edited to kind of pull out a cohesive narrative? Like, what's the process of getting one of these diaries ready for publication?
They are not perfect when they come to me, or should they be? These aren't professional writers. I am. So yeah, I sort of am like a AI, like they send some version of a diary to me. Some are really unpublishable and some are pretty perfect. And I process the diary and there's so many different ways to go about it. Typically, I'll go back to them and I'll clean it up. It's not their job to do the grammar and the structure. I'll do all that up. But I'll say to them, you mentioned here that this is a pattern of yours. Tell us a little bit. I just have to excavate a little mm-hmm. bit. And then also just some basics like, wait, you're going out every night of the week to the best spots in New York. How are you paying for this? Like, your apartment sounds insane. Like, how do you afford that? I like the mundane details mm-hmm. so that we understand someone's full picture. Again, it's so easy to read these diaries and be like, oh my God, everybody's life is so much better than mine. But if you have a little bit of context, it's helpful to understand. We want the diaries to feel grounded too, and not like fantasy or erotica. It is like I had to walk my dog and wait in line at Trader Joe's, and then I came home and got ready for the sex party, So somebody will send me a version of their diary. I'll work with them on making it a little bit deeper, a little bit more complete. And then I always say, are you sure you changed? Go through it one more time. Once it's up, it cannot come down. I've tried it. The powers that be will not take these things down. Mm-hmm. So go through it. Some people don't realize that when you publish something, it's out there for the rest of your life. Yep. Make sure you're totally cool with that. If there's anything that makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable, let's scrap it. It's not worth it. In terms of a narrative, some of them feel like mini movies, and that's great. Like a real snapshot of someone's life filmed by Sofia Coppola or something. Like some of them feel that way. Some of them are just very boring, day in the life of, and those are good too. I think the only thing they all have in common is that they're filtered through me. So there's a little bit of my own spirit in all of them and my own voice. We try to avoid anything that's too dark or too morose or too fucked up, honestly, because it's not the tone of the diary, but also I don't want to ever play with someone who feels unstable. Mm-hmm. No byline is worth that. So those are the only times we might pass on a diarist. But other than that, I'll take anyone. I got a Tuesday night deadline every week of the year.
So your goal here is not to take people's stories and embellish them or make them like the sexiest version or whatever. It's really to work with them to draw out the most compelling narrative based on getting additional contextual information and then, working with them to make sure that it's authentic and that they're very comfortable with it. Because when you're putting something out there like this, you also want to make sure that you've stripped it of any potential identifying information so that these people can remain strictly anonymous.
Yeah, definitely. And some of them are like, I don't care. They say they don't care, but One day they will have an accountant who Googles them or a kindergarten teacher. And it's great to live that way and to be totally comfortable with it. But I'd rather them stay anonymous fully. Yeah. And also I tell them, also don't tell people that this is publishing on Friday night. Like, don't, because you don't know how I like it to be a very personal experience. I like diarists to do it for themselves and for no one else.
The best sex of your summer won't be rushed. We spend so much of our lives trying to squeeze everything into an already packed schedule, and sometimes our intimate lives end up feeling the same way. We rush through foreplay, focus on the finish line, and forget that pleasure is often found in slowing down. That's one of the things I really like about Beducated. They offer more than 150 expert-led courses on everything from communication and desire to techniques for building deeper intimacy. And since summer is all about slowing down a little, it's the perfect time to explore some of their courses, like slow sex, pillow play, or the date night playbook. One of the biggest takeaways I've had from studying sexuality is that anticipation and mindful attention can be just as important, if not more so, than technique. Sometimes doing less and being more present is exactly what leads to a better experience. So if you're looking to kick off your own summer of love, click the link in the episode description and take the Beducated quiz. You'll get a personalized roadmap to a slower, more pleasurable sex life, whether you're exploring on your own or with a partner. So in your years of collecting sex diaries, has it been the case that somebody agreed to do the diary, but then they didn't actually end up having sex? Like maybe they wanted to, but for whatever reason, it just didn't happen?
Definitely. And I love that. I love a sex-free sex diary. We're sexual creatures, even when we're not having sex. So it's like, oh, you didn't have sex. Did you think about sex? Did you masturbate? Did you feel like you had absolutely no libido and your sex drive was dead? It's all interesting. It's all very relatable and accessible to all of us. So my editor used to pass on the diaries that were too graphic, where there was too much sex. So there's no one way.
And I think it's important to show that diversity and variability in sexual experience, and not everybody is swinging from the chandeliers every Friday night having sex, And I think that's important because a lot of us engage in social comparison, and, we might read these stories and assume that that's what my sex life should look like, or what I should be doing, or what everybody else is doing, and then they feel inadequate. And so I think it's good for people to see that, hey, people have very different varied experiences with this, and there is no one right way for your sex life to look.
Oh, completely. I mean, I live with that inner battle inside my own psyche constantly. Like, I have 2 young kids, no childcare, about 7 full-time jobs. I am not horny most of the time. And yet here is this career where I'm a sexpert, or like modern day Carrie Bradshaw or whatever. And I've turned into one of those, like, I have a headache, not tonight, baby women. And I hate that about myself a lot of the time. And I'm struggling with it. And I don't have a therapist. So I'm probably the first person on your podcast who doesn't get therapy. So
Well, so I would imagine people probably have a lot of stereotypes about you as a sex columnist, because people have a lot of stereotypes about me as a sex educator and researcher, and they assume that I must be hypersexual and perpetually horny and having sex all the time. And it's like, even though I'm writing and talking about and researching sex all day long, that doesn't mean that I'm turned on by what I do. I sometimes say, this is my job, not my kink.
Exactly. I don't know if you could do what we do and not, I like sex. I know that good sex is good for you. It's like the Mediterranean diet. It's just good for you. I know that to my core. I have a healthy relationship with sex. But yeah, we got a house upstate. I have a long-term partner, and we got a house upstate. And one of our neighbors, who I really love, and we've become friends, but one of the first things she said to us was, we Googled you. Will you two be putting red Adirondack chairs on your porch? And I was like, I had no idea what she was talking about. And I was like, haha, whatever. And I Googled it, or I found a Reddit thread, and it was like, if you're swingers, somewhere out there it said you put red chairs on your porch to signify the fact that you're swingers. And I was like, what get me out of here. Like, this town, these people are so sheltered. I can't believe they would think that. I don't belong here. But, they'd never met a sex writer before, so they didn't know.
Yep.
We're not swingers. We happen to actually be monogamous, which is so embarrassing, but we are.
So after reading so many intimate stories, I imagine it's probably difficult to shock or surprise you at this point, but I'm sure there have been moments along the way that maybe completely changed the way that you think about sex or relationships. And so I was wondering if you could share a story or two that kind of gave you a new perspective on sex or maybe just made you think differently.
Yeah. When I started this column, it's like I didn't have a lot to unlearn, but I had a lot to learn, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And in doing this book, I'm not saying it to plug the book. It doesn't matter. But writing about poly couples and E&M couples, I learned a lot. I mean, I knew how it worked, and I knew that these were my people in many ways, but I learned a lot of language. I learned about compersion. I never knew that word. And I love that word so much. I love the concept of compersion so much. One of the diaries in there, I think it's my favorite one. No, they're all my favorites. One of the great ones in there is a woman who is in a heterosexual couple, and they have a pet fetish, a kink, where she often will get on all fours and moo like a cow or bark like a dog, eat from a bowl, pretend she's eating grass on the ground. They're so great, this couple. They're so wonderful. I want to be her best friend. They're so in love. They're very, quote unquote, normal, like the way that their jobs are normal, their apartments, it's like, and I never heard of that kink before in a non-joking or mocking way. Maybe there's like, my friend dated some German CEO who liked to be walked around on a leash. I remember that story. But these were people that literally could, are my neighbors or sitting next to me on the subway. And that one really opened my eyes to my own biases and my own judgments. I would have thought that a couple like that was inherently really inaccessible to someone like me. And turns out they set some relationship goals for me because it really works for them. It's strange. It's different. It really works for them. They're really in love. He really gets off on it and she gets off on him getting off. It's just different.
So many people have so many misconceptions and stereotypes about people with kinks, right? Even many sex therapists themselves, they'll often assume that if somebody has a kink that they can't carry on a healthy relationship. Like there was this survey of sex therapists that was published in an academic journal a few years ago. And it was somewhere around 30 to 40% of therapists thought that a relationship could just never work out for somebody who has a kink, because there is this idea that kink is correlated or associated with mental illness or something like that. And, the truth of the matter is that it's not true at all. And that, many of the people who are into kink are just like everybody else, and they can have perfectly happy, healthy, and fulfilling relationships. And I think sometimes it's hard for people to understand that until they meet somebody who has a kink, and then they realize, oh, this person is just like me, where it has to become something where they're humanized. And I think that's one of the important things that your column and that your book do, is that it really tries to humanize people who have, sexual interests that might be very different from you. And it shows that they're a real person and they're normal and there's nothing wrong with them. And they just happen to have a different sex life or different sexual interests.
Totally. And I think there's a spectrum. I mean, I think we all have kinks. I mean, I'm so turned on when my partner mows the lawn and does shit for me around the house. I want him so bad when he is my TaskRabbit. There's a kink in there. I mean, we all know what we like. We just don't have the language for it or the courage to say, it out loud if it's different.
Yeah. So you've been collecting people's sexual diaries for many, many years, and you've kind of had this front row seat to what's happening in people's sex lives during this interesting period of social change. Like over the last decade or so, we've had the rise of dating apps. Like the number of people who are using dating apps has more than tripled in a decade. Social media has become an even bigger part of our everyday life. There have been lots of changes in gender norms and the Me Too movement. We had a pandemic. We had all of these things that really reshaped relationships and how we connect with other people in different ways. And so I was just sort of curious that, over this period of time, have you noticed any changes in the kinds of stories that you've been receiving from people?
I mean, I've noticed words like consent coming up all the time now. It never came up before. Thank God for that. I've definitely noticed everyone seems to be gender fluid or sexually fluid, or at least, even if they're monogamous because they want to be. I mean, not everyone. Again, there's like this self-selection of diarists because they're people who read New York Magazine. You know what I mean? It's like liberal-minded. I try to branch out as much as I can. But yeah, there's the fluidity, consent, and field. I really think field. Okay, so I felt like I couldn't go on this book tour without having a field profile because I'm always talking about field, and I was in like, we're monogamous, but cuspy, very cuspy on the cusp. So I was like, it's fine. I'm going to go get it. I told my partner, I'm like, I'm going on field. God, that is awesome. To be able to really, are you on it?
I do a lot of work with Field, so okay. I'm very, very familiar with the app.
Okay, let's leave it at that. So to be able to really articulate what your fantasies are, what you desire, what you're not sure about and you're curious about, I think is so awesome. And we're really moving fast and furiously in that direction. A lot has changed in the post-Me Too, post-COVID world. And I hope it's for the better. I know there's reports. Sometimes, the whole thing where people aren't having sex and everyone's talking too much and fucking too little. Perhaps, but I think it will all even out nicely in the end. I hope.
Yeah, I mean, actually, now that I think about it, your column is sort of an interesting juxtaposition to a lot of the narrative that we hear in the media about the so-called sex recession and how, yes, you do see those headlines all the time about how people aren't fucking anymore. But, if we consult your column, plenty of people still are, right? And so we do have certainly like a growing number of people, and we see this in our data, a growing number of people who have never had sex at all or are having sex very infrequently. But we also have people who are having the most and best sex that they've ever had before. And I think it's just sort of a very, we're very bifurcated when it comes to our sex lives where, you've got a lot of people who are at kind of both of the extremes. And it seems like a sort of shrinking middle is kind of my take on it.
That's a good point. The messy middle is what we all want more of. I know what you mean. I guess I sort of live in the messy middle. So to me, it's very much like the ethical sluts quote, like, take what you want and leave the rest. I feel like there's so many roads to go down if you're dating or looking for sex or in a sexual relationship. I think it's very healthy. I hate that it is like, oh, I have no sex. I'm vanilla. We have no sex. Birthdays and Christmas. Or in my world, it's a lot of like, fucking my husband is a chore. It's just one more thing on my to-do list. It's like I have that side of things. And then on the other are my diarists who are having play parties and being tied up and having several partners at once. And God bless all of them. But it would be nice to meet in the middle for those of us who are curious about all of it.
Yeah. So after spending all of these years listening to people tell you their most intimate stories, what's the biggest lesson, the single biggest thing you've taken away from all of this? What has collecting all of these diaries taught you?
It's taught me the value of emotional honesty, that until you are really true to yourself, nothing's going to work out. I mean, it's nothing's sustainable. Your joy or the euphoria you're experiencing or the relationship, you have to be truthful to yourself. It's very hard. And then once you can figure out what it is you want or desire or like, and find the bravery to say it out loud, there's so much joy ahead.
I love that. And, I'd say something similar based on my work on sexual fantasies is that when we learn to embrace our fantasies and drop the shame associated with them, we can tap into these new forms of pleasure and excitement when we can finally share them with a partner and maybe even act on some of them. So I love that about the emotional honesty, coming to terms with yourself and uncovering new pleasure sources. So thank you so much for this amazing conversation, Alyssa. I'm really looking forward to discussing your new book, Sex Diaries, further with you in the next show and talking all about stories about ethical and consensual non-monogamy. Can you please tell my listeners where they can go to learn more about you and your work and get a copy of your new book?
Sure. Well, they can follow me on Instagram. It's at Alyssa Shalaski. Kind of a mouthful, but you'll find me. And then the book is called Sex Diaries. It's based on my popular New York Magazine column called Sex Diaries. Google Sex Diaries and you'll get it all.
Great. And I'll be sure to include links to all of that in the show notes. Thank you again so much for your time. I really appreciate having you here.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. To keep up with new episodes of this podcast, visit my website, Sex and Psychology, at sexandpsychology.com, or subscribe on your favorite platform, where I hope you'll take a moment to rate and review the show. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, please consider becoming a Sex and Psychology Premium subscriber to enjoy ad-free listening for just $3.99 a month. You can also follow me on social media for daily sex research updates. I'm on Blue Sky and X at Justin Lehmiller and Instagram at Justin J. Lehmiller. Also, be sure to check out my book, Tell Me What You Want. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.